let's get this show on the road. Heck, one moment. Alright, so I'm just gonna go right into it by talking about what I taught last time. I began my long lesson by talking about how one might make a pattern from nothing. And there are a lot of parallels in plushie making patterns with clothes making patterns. So one way you can arrive at a pattern is through math. In the case of clothes, you can, like, because humans are basically all the same shape, you know, we all have a head, we all have arms, you can mathematically arrive at a pattern by just entering the sizes of the person that you're going to make a shirt for, and then following these instructions. And then once you do, you should end up with a pattern that fits this individual like a glove. There's some parallels to this in plushie making, as I will go on to show how to make, for example, a perfect sphere. But most of the time, you're going to resort to other ways of making a plushie pattern because, you know, plushies are all different. The second way you can arrive at a pattern is through draping. And once again, this is much easier using clothes and people than it is on plushies, because people are more or less the same. You can use a dress form or you can use an actual human and just kind of throw fabric and paper on top of them and just start cutting and pinning, and you'll eventually arrive at a pattern that fits the shape that you want. When it comes to plushies, some people do make a figure beforehand, such as these clay figures, and they will drape tissue paper or fabric over top of them in order to make the pattern. You can also sculpt your figure out of foam, or you can sculpt it out of tape, and then just cut the tape and you will arrive at your pattern. Let's see, what is this? Okay. And then here comes the really crazy parts, in which you manipulate an existing pattern. So you can either use a mathematical pattern that you arrived at, or you can drape a pattern and then go on and alter it further. But then eventually you have to get skilled at how to manipulate a pattern, a 2D pattern, to create the 3D shape that you want. So let's see, last time I explained how a pattern like this is the original pattern, you can not very easily, but it's quite possible for you to rotate the apex of a dart to close a dart or open a dart. So you can see how in this one there were two darts to begin with. They closed this one and opened up that one. And you don't have to use existing darts. You can also use, just make a slash, such as over here, at the apex of a dart, and then rotate the darts in order to make a whole new dart. Now I've been using the word dart. What is a dart? A dart is usually a triangular shaped cutout of a fabric that when you join together, it will make a bit of a hump at its apex. So as I show over here, if you take a circle and you take a pie slice out of it, and then you join these pie slices, you will end up with a cone. And you see the cone has a very distinct point at the top. The triangle, quote-unquote, that you take out of this piece of fabric doesn't necessarily have to be a triangle. If it's a little bit tapered, like in this example, you can end up with something that has a very gentle kind of hump at the top. And you can even have two darts, like here there's one dart, here there's two darts, and you can just kind of end up with a bun shape if you do that, because then there won't be such a sharp point at one dart. It's kind of a shared hump between two darts. And over here I had demonstrated that the bigger the angle of this pie slice, the more sharp the angle is at the apex of the hump, or the apex of the dart. So here it turns into that, and if you take a very small slice, it will turn into a very shallow kind of a hump. Let's see. At this point, I showed. Oh, let me just get a bit of water. Okay, at this point, I showed quite a few different sphere patterns because, you have your sphere and you can arrive at it through several different ways. Most importantly is the beach ball pattern, which is this one over here. We're all kind of familiar with the beach ball, this sucker. We all kind of understand how these petal-like shapes, if you take enough of them and you join them together, it will make a sphere, just like in this expanded globe over here. And also, I just want you to note that the more of these petal shapes you have, the more the shape is going to resemble an actual sphere. Because kind of like polygons, the more pieces you have, the more smoothness you're going to get out of your final shape. In this example, we have a beach ball petal pattern, but we only have 4 petals, and each petal is kind of fat, and the angle at the top is rather large. The shape you're going to end up with is going to look a little bit triangular from the top. So imagine if we're looking at this final form from the top. And the reason for that is because this red line over here is a certain length, but the blue curved line is going to be longer. So you can see how it's represented in the final shape, with the red line being quite short and the blue line being longer. So you end up with a bit of a square. However, if you go on to the 6-petaled pattern, note that the angle is shallower, the width to length is kind of a different ratio, it's skinnier, and your resulting shape is starting to get more circular because the outside curve is starting to resemble in length the inside length. And of course, once you get into 8 pieces, it's going to go more and more circular. Let's see. And I went into detail last time about how you can mathematically create a ball you can mathematically create a sphere with the 8-petaled beach ball pattern. And it doesn't have to be 8 pieces, it can be any number of pieces. But for this formula, we ended up with an 8-piece. And it is exactly the size I wanted it to be. I originally wanted it to be 10 inches, so that's what it ended up being. And I also wanted to point out how the angle at the top needed to be 45 degrees. Each of these little angles on top of this segmented orange. And that's because this top area is a circle. It's basically a flat circle when they're all joined together. And a circle has 360 degrees in it. You divide that by 8, and you get 45. If you were to make this angle a little bit too fat, such as in this blue line over here, then you might get kind of a pucker in your final shape, which is okay if that's what you want, because look at that, you can make a charming little pumpkin. If you end up with your angle a little bit too small, like in this purple example, then you'll end up with a bit of a nipple at the top, which is okay again, if that's what you want. Now these petal shapes, you can see this blue shape over here is basically 2 petals put together in order to create, what the heck's wrong with my eraser? In order to create a single shape that has 2 darts in it. And you don't have to connect them at the middle. You can connect them at the top, like in this example down here. And that's there's could be a lot of reasons for doing that as you go along your plushing adventures. You'll find advantages to either form or all sorts of other weird forms. I also want to make a little note how you see this angle here should now be a 90-degree angle, because each of these petals used to be 45 degrees, so together they are 90 degrees. So now that we have arrived at a basic sphere pattern, I'm going to discuss why we might want to deviate from the beach ball pattern, or why we want to manipulate any pattern from one form into another. So I'll just very quickly go through that. You might want to manipulate a pattern because you want the nap of the fabric to go a particular way. Now, what is nap? Nap is the fur of the fabric and the direction that it goes. On this Mr. Saturn nose, his nose is basically, how do I say, it's kind of a flowery shape. So on that big chart of different sphere patterns, I have this one as an example. It's kind of like that, and when you join all the darts together, it becomes a single kind of a dome-like shape. And because it's a single piece of fabric, the nap, the direction of the fur, is going to go downwards the entire time. However, I didn't do that for my Metroids over here, because if I were to do that, then what's going to happen is the front of the Metroid is going to have the nap going forwards, but the back of it is going to have it going upwards, and I didn't want that. So what the Metroids are, is they're made out of the beach ball pattern, basically. And they're all joined at the top, and the nap for each one goes their own separate direction. So the actual nap on this Metroid is more like this. Okay, the next reason you might want to manipulate a pattern is to provide a seam in which to insert something. So this means literally inserting a thing, such as these wings. I wouldn't be able to insert the wings if I didn't have this seam. Let's choose a better color. The seam that kind of runs down the backs of the Chimera. This seam also enables me to just exude a bit of fabric in order to create the ears. And because of that seam, I can also create the feet. And the seam just kind of continues down here. I might also manipulate a pattern in order to make it easier to insert small structures that are difficult to sew. So for example, on this Crocomire, every single one of his arms has a convenient seam coming out of it. So you see, these guys. And the reason for that is to make it easier for me to sew his arms and legs into his body. Because if you think about it, each of his arms and legs are basically tubes. So I'm just going to draw a tube up here. And the tube has a seam going along the bottom. If you were to open that seam and just open up this cylinder, you'll see that it's basically just a square of fabric that's eventually fit into this little hole. Now, how do I do that? It's because, I'm able to do it because of this seam. With this seam, I can now open up that circle. So envision in your brain minds that I have opened up the circle. Let's draw this a slightly different way. So here's the seam, and I've just kind of pulled the circle apart. And here's the bottom of that seam. So you see this area, these two areas correspond to these two areas. And because now this is so open, I can sew this flat piece of fabric onto this curve. And once I do, all I need to do is sew up the seam that makes up and sew up the seam on this flat piece of fabric in order to make it a tube, which would be right around here in the Crocomire or underneath him. And then I would sew up the seam on the body. So then I would sew up here, kind of all in one go. And that will close up this arm. Yeah, that made sense, didn't it? Okay, the next reason I might manipulate a pattern is to change the angle of a structure. It's really hard to see here, but this new plushie has a seam on his front, which is kind of at the center of this piece of fabric. However, in the back portion, this seam is slightly more towards the center front. And the reason for that is because, just like how I connected the Crocamire's arms, I connected the Gnu's feet in kind of the same way. And in moving the seam slightly towards the center, I have moved the Gnu's foot to angle slightly outwards in order to give him a bow-legged effect, which is very important to his character. This particular Gnu is my latest iteration of the pattern, but I've gone through many new patterns in the past. And there was one early version in which he had the same feet, but they were pointed forwards, and I'm like, oh man, like that just kind of doesn't look good. If you're familiar with Chrono Trigger, which is where the character Gnu comes from, like the Gnu has bow-legged legs, and that's very important to how he looks. And now he's able to have that. Yay! So sometimes I might manipulate a pattern in order to reduce bulk. So these are two Gimmick Plushies from the game Mr. Gimmick, and this one there's one that's an older version, and this one is the newer version. The difference is that this newer version does not have this seam. And the reason for that is because when you have all of your points, all of your points going towards one area, it becomes very bulky and hard to sew. And you're more likely to have small errors as well. Because imagine, as you're sewing, maybe you're sewing 1 millimeter beyond what the pattern is asking you to sew. And usually that's not a huge deal, you know, like you're not perfect, you might be a millimeter off or something. But imagine if you were to keep repeating that mistake 8 times, because there's 8 pieces here. So therefore you end up with with your final plushie, which is 8 millimeters too big at the bottom. So that's no good. So what I've done here is, okay, well, let's draw this pattern out first. At the bottom here, it's basically an 8-piece petal pattern. So if you can envision, this is the bottom of one of the petals, and here's the bottom of another petal with a hole to account for the legs. I should draw this a little differently, actually. Oh. Kind of like that. So what I have done for this pattern is I basically decided to rotate the dart. So I just made a slit here. And I rotated this whole piece. Kind of like that. So if you could see past his foot, you'll see there's a circle here, and there's a dart that now goes up here. Another thing I wanted to note is how this is now a right angle, 90 degrees. Each of these were 45 degrees. But now you can very clearly see how this has become 90 degrees. Yeah, we're going to be fixating on angles pretty soon, so I just wanted to point that out while I can. Let's see. So another reason you might manipulate a pattern is to change the apex of a dart, moving where the hump is. So here is Samus's butt, and in this version, her butt is not very juicy. In this version, it's got a lot more juice, because it's got a lot more seams. This one only has one seam over here. This one has, you can't really see it, but there's one here, one here, one here. It gives her a nice butt crack, and it gives her, you know, just a warmth to her character, let's say. She also has a dart right over here, so you can see how that narrows down her waist and kind of forms an apex at these two areas. Let's see. So yeah, if you're getting down into like really sculpting your pattern, like really controlling like the curves of it, then you need to really understand how to move darts around, how to add them, and like what their behavior is. And that's quite a big part of plushie making. Another reason I might manipulate a pattern is to provide space to do embroidery. So this is a slightly more advanced version of a Metroid that I showed you before, but parts of it are still similar to how it was before. The dome is still 6 pieces that are basically like this. However, the very front of it, I actually joined 2 of them together. Like that. So you can see how there's a dart here, which corresponds to the dart here, and one down here, which corresponds to the dart over here. But it was very important that I leave this middle part with no sewing so that I can embroider the nuclei on. Because the thing is, you technically can embroider on top of a seam, but that's really hard to do because you need to put your sewn fabric on top of your sewing machine or onto the hoop of your embroidery machine, and then give it the proper registration. Otherwise, it will not sew properly. And also, it's kind of bulky. The results might not look so good. So I really do not like sewing over embroidery. Either sewing over it before it's been embroidered or after it's been embroidered. So yeah, I will try to avoid that if I can. Now the final reason you might want to manipulate a pattern is for aesthetic reasons. Very simply, you want to put a piece of color in. So here's what I've done for Shantae's head. Yeah, I just had to change the pattern in order to insert pieces of color. And in the case of Quirrell and Grim over here, some of their seams are less about, well, they're still about structure, but also about the look. Because Quirrell is kind of a buggy-like dude, a kind of an insect, he has seams that kind of give off that insect shell look. And this was really nice because not only does it give him that look, that segmented look, but also I used it to my advantage to give him structure. The same deals with the cape here. It's part of Grimm's design that he has lines on his cape. And the lines also help create this collar shape. Okay, every once in a while I'm looking at the chat. Yankee Love, I see that you say, I don't get how to make armholes that connect to the body. Ah, we're going to go into that in specific a little later on, so you just hold on to your butts. Okay. I'm going to take a little drink of water. So, for all you guys who just came in, I just want to remind you that once I'm done the lecture part of this seminar, I'm going to ask for character requests that I can make a plushie out of. So you can go on and search for an image of a character that you like, and later when I ask for it, you can post it on the chat and I will choose one to make a plushie out of. Now I'm gonna want to make a character that I'm familiar with and that I like. So it's a good bet if you use Nintendo characters. Yep, and another thing that's happening is we're doing a Grub plush giveaway. So you can win one of my very own designed plushies if you type in the chat !giveaway. And then at the end of the stream, we're going to choose a person who will win their very own haunted grub that will talk to them at night. Alright, so now we're going into actual examples of sphere manipulation. And this is where it's just about to get fun. And also this was where I ran into technical difficulties last time. So this ought to be good. This ought to be great. So I want to show you this little sphere that I made. And last time I showed it on camera, from a distance, it just looks like a sphere with the bottom part cut away, because this was meant to be a base shape for a neck. Or for a head, so therefore there's a hole at the bottom for the neck. And this is the back of the sphere. And we're all pretty familiar with this shape now. It's basically the 8-piece petal pattern, in which the top two pieces have, or the top, not the top two, two pieces have been joined together at the top. So let me just draw the seam lines so they can be more visible. It's kind of like that. Let's see. So how I arrived at this pattern was I did that mathematical formula to arrive at one of the 8-piece petal patterns. And then I took this shape and I rotated it. Let's make it kind of like this. Obviously I didn't draw it entirely accurately, but it's something like that. Ah, jeez. And the top should have a right angle. And I obliterated parts of the bottom to make room for the neck. So I hope you can see how this shape turned into this pattern. However, I turned this sphere backwards, or not backwards, I turned it around, and you see now there's a completely different shape, or a completely different series of lines, a completely different series of seams, even though the surface area of the front and the back are exactly the same. Now, I'm going to explain how I arrived at this pattern, and also why I decided to do this wacky pattern. So let me just draw in the seam lines so everyone can see what's going on. It's got this big old cutout over here on each side. It has a seam at the bottom, it has a seam at the top, it has a seam at the sides. So let's explore how I arrived at that. So I took this shape and I doubled it once again. So now that 8-piece petal pattern has become, like, instead of putting 2 of them together, this has 4 of those petal shapes together, because I joined them at the middle. This is kind of weird. Oh, I didn't reverse it. That's why it looks weird. Ah, whatever. It's fine. You can already see how there's a dart down here and a dart up here, which corresponds to the dart over here and over here on the final pattern. Let's see. I'm just going to color this in. And then I want the darts at the top, or at the top sides. So I would make a little dart here. And I can't just go and like cut out a piece, for example. Because if I did that, then I have removed fabric. And I don't want to do that. I still want to maintain roughly the same amount of surface area. So what I did was I took this piece and I rotated it. Check that out. If I were to do the same thing on the other side, you notice I'm rotating at the apex of the dart. Now I can actually get rid of this middle dart, or narrow it down a little bit. However, the dart that I made is not one that goes all the way to the center here, because that would be dumb. I have made this dart a little bit smaller. Well, I started by making it a little bit smaller. I should use a different color maybe. However, you notice that there's like missing areas. It's kind of hard to see. There's missing areas on the inside. This represents added fabric. So if I were to leave it like this, then this sphere will actually have a slightly bigger surface area than the original shape. So what I did instead was I actually made this dart a little bit larger. And in doing so, I have in some ways taken this extra material and removed it somewhere else. So it's kind of like I'm a mad scientist doctor who's like taking skin from one area and putting it in another and hoping that it will work. And to some extent it kind of does work, but you kind of got to be careful. Another thing you have to watch out for is I have changed the angle of the dart. So this original one has a particular angle about it. But once I drew in something, it now has a slightly different angle. And I need to compensate for that. And I'm going to explain that more as I go on later. In this case, what I did was I extended the dart out slightly and kind of just eased the outside of it in order to accommodate for the change in angle. So now the angle should be similar. Alright. So let's move on to this weird cutout shape. So I just, just went and cut it out like this. Let's remove this piece. And I want you to note how, by removing it, you can very clearly understand that the length of this blue line is the exact same length as this blue line, okay? Because we're going to have to maintain that as we go and continue with our manipulations. So this piece has a big old dart in it that I'm going to just straight up get rid of. And I do that by very slowly rotating. So I'm just closing up the dart little by little. Rotating on the apex of the dart. Now, when I usually make my plushie patterns, I don't do this on the computer or anything. It's mostly just by hand on a piece of paper, and I do this kind of thing kind of intuitively and not so mathematically. Like, I've been going on and on about how, oh, you gotta, maintain certain numbers and mathematically arrive at things. That's just kind of... It's kind of like how you gotta learn programming first before you get into the art of game making. Or you gotta learn, the properties of paint and brushes before you get to painting your masterpiece. So you gotta learn, you know, how fabric and whatever physically works before you go off and try to do the artistic stuff. Let's see, okay, I'm just looking at the chat. So there's a question, how do you maintain the scale? I'm not quite sure what you mean by scale. Oh, so like the head and body aren't out of proportion. Oh, sometimes I don't. I try my best to, like oftentimes when I'm designing a pattern, I might get a request like, please make this plushie 8 inches tall. I'm like, okay, so I will enlarge that pattern on just my monitor until it's 8 inches, and I'll look at it and be like, okay, the head therefore is 4 inches tall, and then I would do that big old math thing that I did before. Ta-da! I want the head to be 8 inches, so I'll do the mathematical thing to get 8 inches. But of course that only applies if I'm trying to draw a head. When it comes to trying to do like the body, I'll try my best, keeping in mind that it's still a 3D object, so therefore I can't just say, oh, it's 2 inches wide, so I'm just going to make this pattern 2 inches. No, I gotta account for 2 inches at the front, 2 at each of its sides, and 2 in the back. So the final pattern might end up being like 8 inches long or something like that. And I'm still probably going to get it wrong. In which case, I will just take scan the pattern into my computer and just resize it by 5% or so on and so forth. Anyway, back to my explanation here. So I have closed up the seam, so this seam is all gone. However, I have ended up with quite a lot of excess fabric and also excess length. If I were to close this up, the blue line will no longer match the blue line on the main piece of fabric. So what do I do? Well, it gets a little wishy-washy, but what I ended up doing was basically I just kind of shaved the shape. In doing so, not only do I get rid of some excess fabric, thereby canceling out the amount that was added, I have also reduced the length, which should now match this blue line again. I will have to take my tape measure and actually measure it to be like, okay, this fits. So that is the new pattern. Let's just move this a little closer. Let's get rid of this theme, get rid of it. Get rid of all this junk. Horizontal, so that I get a symmetrical other side. So that's what the pattern looks like for this. Now, why the heck did I do that? Alright, let me show you. This was kind of a test head that I made in order to create a creature that a customer had requested. And what the character involves is it involves ears. Now let's keep it slightly darker. So in putting this seam here, I was able to give it 3D ears. This particular character has hair sewn at the top, so I could very easily hide the seam at the top. This character has eyebrows that need to be embroidered in, and because I don't want embroidery to go over a seam ever, I had to separate these parts. This character has big ol' eyes. And this character has a snout. So I ended up completely removing this bottom part, so I don't even need to worry about this bottom seam. And I built in a snout. So, here you can see how or why I would manipulate the simple shape into a more complicated one in order to account for the final product that I want, and you know, like, given all the reasons that I've previously stated. Alright, I'm gonna take a drink of water. Okay, I'm reading the chat now. Gigaxibas7 has asked, do you simply supply the plushies or do you make them for yourself in the shop? So maybe I should talk a little bit about my process and what my involvement is with Fangamer. I actually go into it a bit more detail in part 1, which you can see on the Twitch VODs. I talk about myself a little bit and just my education and my journey that took me to where I am now and what I currently do. What I do is I make prototypes of plushies that will be sent to Fangamer, and then they will send it to their manufacturing factory, and those will be created by the thousands and then sold to you. Because I sure as heck cannot keep up with demand if I was to make each and every one of these individually. Fangamer will, they usually take, I'm not quite sure if it's the developers that go to them or they that go to the developers. I think there's been cases of both. And together they will create a design spec, which is basically, you know, like a kind of a turnaround of a character. Or sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just give me the character sprites from a game and say, okay, make a plushie out of this. And I'll be like, okay. So I go ahead and do that. And they will look at it and be like, okay, please make the head bigger or the eyes smaller, etc., etc. Then I will make a second prototype, and so on and so forth, until they arrive at one that they like. And then I will send it off to Fangamer, and I will also give them the pattern and all of my in-progress images, and any kind of embroidery, and all that stuff, which they will eventually use to create the final product that everyone will buy and like, have in their houses. Let's see, is the volume really low? La la la. Okay, it seems to be fine for most people. Check the audio volume. Should I turn up? Okay, I'll turn up the mic a little bit. Testing, 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 testing. Okay, that's a little better. Yeah, another thing about if you were to get me to make all the stuff is that you probably couldn't afford me because, you know, like the cost it takes to mass manufacture a product is so much cheaper than to custom make one each time. Like for each of my plushies, I charge anywhere between like $50 to like $300. And of course, I get paid quite a bit more for prototyping. So it's better that everything gets mass manufactured. Let's see, there was a question beforehand about, let me just scroll up here. Let's see. Yaki Love says, you must feel awesome to see your work loved by hundreds of people. I don't know. Like, personally, I have more pride when people buy, like, my own works that I have made with my own hands. Because, you know, I've made them myself, and, like, I know about its quality. And also, there's a little bit of, I don't know, there's a bit of an invisibility when it comes to plush artists. Like, honestly, I don't think most plushies that you get these days are made by an artist per se. Like it feels like when they're prototyped by the factory, they're not, like, it's a little bit nameless. And so people kind of don't expect, like, when they buy a plushie, they don't go like, oh, it's made by this and this artist. Unlike, you know, t-shirt patterns, or not t-shirt pattern, but t-shirt designs, or poster designs. So people, like, will just buy my plushies and not really know that it was designed by me. But if they bought it from like my Etsy shop or something, like they tend to know who I am, and they kind of stalk me a little bit, and it's pretty cool because like at conventions and such, like they'll come up to me and be like, "Oh, you made this," and I'm like, "Yeah, I did." Like I got a funny story about that. Like back when I was at PAX, let me just put up this new image so we have something new to look at. Like people were making Metroid hats because I don't know, they were just kind of a popular thing, and I was already making them. Maybe I was the first one to make them, maybe I made the best ones, I'm not sure. But I kept on looking at the different hats going like, oh, this person just glued nuclei onto their hat, or this hat doesn't look that good. And then I saw one from like way far in the distance, and I kind of squinted at it and went like, that one actually looks pretty nice. And the guy wearing it kind of turned around and made a beeline for me and go like, hey, you're Eyes5, you made my hat. I'm like, oh, okay, I made your hat. Okay, a bunch of people have been talking, so let me just go back and read all that. Space Coyote says, so many people seem to not understand and think that a custom plushie is too expensive. Yep. It's the same with any kind of custom art. People will often, like I'm sure if you are an artist who sells things, you know, individually, you've come across this before in which people are just like, oh, you're so expensive. You know, I can buy the same thing or a similar thing and it's way cheaper. But, you know, that's because you bought it mass manufactured. Okay, what else have people been saying? Okay, alright, let's go on with my lecture. Hey, look, it's Katamari. So, I want to talk about how I came up with this Katamari ball shape. Because it's actually kind of really fun visually to see like the process. So of course when I started this making this plushie, I didn't have the final product. What I was given was just this image here in the middle. I was given these two images. That to get they were kind of helpful, but this one was kind of strange because obviously I looked at it and I'm like, oh, the coloring absolutely cannot be like that, because if you imagine it from the side and from the top and from the bottom, it would not be symmetrical all the way. So I had to go and like draw a sample from the top and the sides to really understand how the colors are going to be in a wave. And I decided, okay, the top is going to be kind of like a fidget spinner, and as it kind of expands, you can kind of see from the side it becomes a bit of a waveform. And that's really convenient, because if you look at one of these slices, and yeah, I forgot to mention, this is a 6-petaled shape, 6-petaled sphere shape. If you look at each one of these slices, it is mirrored with the slice beside it. So it's really convenient. Instead of making, you know, 6 individual patterns, I just need to make 3. And in fact, I need to make less than 3, because each of these bigger pie pieces are identical. So in essence, I'm making 1 and just inverting it 3 times. So how did I arrive at that? Okay, you see they gave me an 8-inch diameter, so I went through that whole mathematical process to arrive at a petal shape that is 12.56 inches in height, 8.37 inches in width, and the top needs to be 60 degrees, because 360 degrees divided by 6, there's 6 petals, is 60 degrees. Okay, so let's take this shape. This brush size so big. And let's see, how many colors are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I divided this into 8 segments that are slightly uneven, and it'll make sense why eventually. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Is that 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. Okay. And the same with the other side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that 8? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. Let's make this one a little lower. So they're a little bit askew, these divisions, because of that fidget spinner shape. So you see, I'm just gonna make these waveforms now. And let's color them in. Did I miss a color? I missed a color. There we go. The heck? That's better. Okay. So I could have stopped here. I could have gone like, okay, we've got 1 out of the 6 petals. Let's just do that 3 times, flip it 3 times more. However, you can imagine how freaking annoying that is. Transform and flip horizontal. Because how many pieces is that? That's 8 pieces per petal. And times that by 6, there's 6 petals. That is, come on math, 6 times 8, 48. Is that 48? Yes, 48. 48 pieces! That's a lot of pieces. And usually I want to keep things as simple as possible for the poor manufacturers that have to make like 1 zillion of these. So I went and made it easier for them. I thought, okay, even though this is curved, oh, I want to place this over here for now. Even though this side is curved, each of these individual bits, let's get a good color here. Each of these individual sides are more or less straight. When there's 2 pieces of fabric that are against each other and they're straight, then I ask myself, why do they need to be 2 separate pieces of fabric? Why don't we just join them? So that's what I did. Oh wait, before I do that, I want to make a note about the negative space here. See, there's like extra space over here. In a way, what we're going to be doing next is redistributing that negative space. So, let's check it out. Oh, so I'm going to move this aside a little bit. Check it out. So you see, I'm joining the straight sides together. And I'm rotating them so that they join. Look at that. It becomes like this elegant geometrical kind of dealio. I want you guys to pay attention to all this space. This is the redistribution of space that I was talking to you about before. Instead of having that big patch of empty space, we now have tiny patches of empty space that together, when joined, become a curve. Oops. You know, I just noticed that the music has stopped, so let me just take a moment to restart the music. There we go. How long has it been stopped? I didn't even notice. I'm just plushing away as I do, not paying attention to anything. So, there we have it. Each of these colored pieces is a singular piece, and I don't even have to invert them. I have reduced 48 pieces into, let's see, 8 times 3, 24 pieces, which is much easier, and they don't even need to be flipped or anything. I want to make a small note that how up here before it was 60 degrees, this is now 120 degrees. And the same thing down here. Just, it's always good to keep in mind the angles of things. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to read the dang chat, which I think has gone a little bonkers, and I wasn't able to look at it at all. It must have been a nightmare to prototype. No, actually, as you can see, that came about pretty smoothly. Sew those little pieces to make that eye shaded piece. Does the fabric sew those little tiny pieces to make that eye shaped piece? I assume, do you mean like on the prince's face? Because those are, his face is embroidered. Sorry, I'm just still reading chat. Maybe I'll take a chance to drink some water. Let's see, my name is Cracker asks, have your plushies got any secrets in them? The only one I know of is the Raphael plushie. I think it has like a little note on the inside. As for my personal plushies that I make and sell myself, no, I don't put stuff in them. I'm kind of terrified of stuff in them. Always scared that, oh no, what if like a hair gets in? What if a needle is left in? Which is like my worst nightmare. Hopefully that's never happened. My suspicion is that like a lot of manufacturing companies don't have any needles or pins in their factory at all, which just boggles my mind because I'm like, how can you even make plushies without pins? But one of the reasons they don't is because they don't want any kind of a metal to get into a plushie, because that's a lawsuit. Like a lot of some of the factories have metal detectors and stuff, and every plushie gets, you know, looked at through the metal detector. I can't make them into donuts. Ah, Oprel says you can't make them into donuts. I'm not quite sure what you're referring to here, but donuts are very interesting, and I'm actually not going to talk about them this stream, but I think I'll talk about them 2 streams from now. Because donuts are very interesting to make in plushies. Let's see, if you did this flaring on both sides, you wouldn't be able to do this in 16 pieces? Oh! Yes, I technically could. But then, I could reduce the number of pieces, but then it starts becoming, it starts having a bit of a nap issue. Like I mentioned before, like you might manipulate things into more pieces because you want the nap to go a certain way. And also, I'm a little concerned about stretch. Oh, I didn't mention that in like why you might manipulate, stretch is also a huge factor. Because fabric will, minky especially, will stretch in one direction and not another. If you don't keep it even and pay attention to it, then your plushie will warp. I have made things back before I understood stretch, and I've made basically a tube of fabric, but that tube was cut with the stretch kind of going at a diagonal. So the resulting tube actually like curved to one side, and I was just like, what the hey is going on here? Let's see, another reason that I might keep things as more pieces rather than, or less, yeah, more pieces rather than less pieces, is because of the efficiency of the use of fabric. Like if you can imagine you're making, let's say, a dome, which is kind of a flower shape, versus a number of petals to make your sphere shape. You will have to place that dome pattern piece right on top of a big old piece of fabric and kind of discard everything along its sides. But if you have 6 petal shapes, you can kind of line them up in a very efficient way and make better use of your fabric. So that's a reason why I would sometimes opt for more pieces than less. Okay, still reading stuff. For each color. To make the full sphere, in this case you only need 3, because the sphere pattern used to be 6 petals, and I had joined 2 of the petals together. So each strip would be 1 of 3. Praying for those plushies that don't pass inspection. Ah yes, we've all seen like the plushies with like, I remember seeing like a Bulbasaur plushie with like the bulb on its like bottom. That's interesting. Yeah, usually when I make my patterns also, and I have to put notations on them, I try to put tabs on them in such a way that you never get mixed up as to what is left and right. Like I don't have to depend on a seamstress like who've made 1,000 of these plushies to figure out what arm is the left arm and what arm is the right arm. I try to, you know, do that thinking for her. Let's see. How do you pin without pins? With a lot of hope. No, if you ever watch like mass manufacturers, how they work, at most they will use tweezers to just kind of hold that piece of fabric as it goes under the presser foot. But man, it's kind of beyond me. It's crazy. What about new fabric that they use in mochi style fabrics? That one is super stretchy. It must be so hard to manipulate. Nope. If you design a plushie for fabric that's very stretchy, it's not a big deal. That's exactly what you want. And there's ways of sewing to accommodate for stretch. There's certain seams. Like usually on a sewing machine, you have the straight seam. But if you use like a slightly different type of seam, like zigzag can sometimes work. If it's a serger seam, it can work. Or if you simply stretch your fabric as you're sewing it, your seam will not break when you stretch the fabric with stuffing. This is especially important if you're ever sewing for dance wear, like ballerina outfits and skating outfits that are usually, you know, made out of a ton of stretch material, and you know, you don't want that to be failing on you when you're doing like a triple spin on the ice or something. Let's see what else. Do you know anything about the plushie restocks in store? I have no idea. That's a Fangamer question. Besides hats, have you ever sewn clothes or costumes? Yes. Let's see. I went into a bit of my personal history in part 1 of this seminar, which you can find on the Twitch VOD, and it goes into my personal history, which was in costume sewing. So I'm a costumer by profession? Question mark? In fact, every once in a while, I still work on films. Not recently though, because, you know, with everything going on, and also it's a lot of hard work. It's really hard work. I hear people, you know, complaining about a hard day of work, going like, man, I worked from 9 to 5. I'm like, I've worked 18 hours at a stretch. Those were some really good paying days. Like I make $800 on an 18-hour day. But man, that just takes it out of you for days. And most days actually are 12 hours. That's very typical for film costumes. Anyways. Okay. Back to whatever the heck I was doing. Yes. So we have seen this, and now I just wanted to show you what the final pattern actually looked like. It looks very similar to what I just drew, only that there's these big old holes for the pulsating welts on each of the Katamari balls. So you can see there's like kind of a big old hole here and areas for the holes here. Yep, that's that. Okay. So, now you know how to work with a sphere. You know how to change a sphere while still keeping it a sphere. And you know why you might want to do that. However, your plushie may or may not always be a sphere. It could be some other shape, like this cube that I got here, this rectangular sucker thing. And the reason I didn't talk about this before is because it's fairly intuitive. I don't need to tell you about the mathematical way of making a cube. If I were to tell you, okay, you have this shape, and I want it to be 6 inches on this side, 6 inches on this other side, and 8 inches up along the long side, you will be able to give me this pattern pretty easily, pretty intuitively. And you'd be able to say, okay, this purple piece over here, which corresponds to the purple over here, it is 6 by 6. And you can very clearly see it touches the orange over here. So therefore, this orange piece also has 6 inches right over here. You can see the blue piece is over here, and we've got this pink, this green, and this yellow, which represents the sides of this shape that you cannot see. That's straightforward. And if I were to ask you to cut around it, that would be pretty simple too. Like for example, if I were to say, okay, let's cut this sucker like that. In fact, you'd even be able to tell me what the angles are for each of these pieces. Because this is a straight line has 180 degrees. So therefore, each of these pieces is 90 degrees. Same deal up here. However, what if the cut is at an angle? What would... Oh, maybe I should have drawn this upper one. What would this angle be and this angle be? Well, I don't know right now, but I can tell you that the two of them added up is going to be 180 degrees. That's very important. If you ever have a shape that meets with a straight line, it must equal 180 degrees. And we're going to get into more of that as we go along. Heck, I did too much drawing. Okay. Now what happens if we start to go beyond the blocky shape, beyond the cube, beyond the sphere? Let's start actually adding material to your pattern. Let's start adding length to pattern pieces. Let's start adding surface area to pattern pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this little corner and I'm going to mess it the heck up. Wait, not that one. Transform, mesh transformation. Let's say you want something more like this. So what do? Well, you just go like, okay, it's still somewhat intuitive. The pattern piece on this purple is now going to look more like this. the orange, heck, with this perspective, it's really hard to tell what's going on with the orange. But let's say it's extruding outwards. And this blue is also extruding outwards. And the thing you have to keep in mind is as you make these changes, which are not mathematical and very much based on intuition, is that you have to keep in mind every piece that each pattern is touching. You have to make sure this line, let's get a different color. You have to make sure this line is the same length as this line. Even if you have to take your measuring tape and measure them out and be like, yes, these are the same. And the same with all these other sides. Sometimes when I'm making plushies for a client and they say, oh, let's make the shoulders a little bit broader, you know, as if that was a very simple thing to do. It's not, because I have to change everything that touches that shoulder. I have to change, like, at the minimum 3 pattern pieces. If I'm lucky, 2. If I'm not lucky, 6, etc. So the lesson here is to just keep in mind, like, pieces that touch each other and make sure that they're always the same. They're always the same length. Yes. Water time. Now, I'd like to take this moment to remind you that partway through the stream I'll be asking for plushie requests. So prepare a picture of the character that you want to make, or that you want me to make and you think it would make a good plushie, and we can post it later in the chat. Alright, okay, so let's look down at this blocky kind of shape here. This is a very nice shape that you might start off with if you're going to make any kind of animal shape like that has a snout. And you see I've drawn out the pattern pieces. You can pretty intuitively see how, like, we've got the 2 side pieces, we've got all these top pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4 are these ones. 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got the back piece, we've got the bottom piece. Alright, so if you're going to make, let's say, a little bit of a dog plushie, you might be like, it's a little bit angular. Let's, actually, before you even do that, you might be like, okay, I don't need all of these separate pieces. What if I join some of them? What if I join this top and this facing piece? What if I join this bottom and the top of the snout? Alrighty. In that case, you would be joining these pattern pieces together. What the heck? Why is there a line there? What did I do? Whatever. So let's join these up. Let's get rid of their intersection. However, it would probably be a good idea to note exactly where they touch the corners. That way, when you add a seam allowance to it, or no, when you sew it all together, you'll know exactly that this point goes to this point. Okay, so that's one step. But you're looking at it going like, this is still a little bit blocky. Let's curve down this block. Let's make this a curve. Let's make this a curve. Like that. So you have to make the corresponding changes to the pattern piece. But also, you might note that this top piece now needs to be changed as well, because there used to be a corner here, and the length of that corner is longer than the length of the curve. So we're gonna have to move this down a little bit. And these markings for the corners don't mean anything anymore, because you don't have corners to work with. However, you're still going to want some kind of registration indicators, just so you don't sew it and then at the end you go like, oh, I actually don't have enough fabric because somewhere I messed up. So what you could do, and what I generally do, is I would make markers on both sides of the pattern in lieu of actually having like corners, which are very convenient markers. I'd have to go and make them myself, and they can be pretty arbitrary, and I'll have to go and like actually measure the difference between them. So I have to take my measuring tape and be like, okay, the distance between here and here is, I don't know, 8 centimeters. So I have to measure between here and here and say, okay, that is 8 centimeters. It's going to be okay. And so on and so forth. All right. Now let's further mess up this pattern by going like, okay, I want the head to be a little bit tapered. I want the head to be bigger. So therefore the snout becomes a little bit more tapered. Yeah. Did that make sense? Anyways, is skew the one I want? Yes. So, what the heck have I done here? In this case, the side pieces actually don't necessarily need to be changed too much. I'm just going to keep them as they are. However, the top piece now has undergone big changes. And these are changes that, like, that didn't affect it all the way to its tip, because I didn't really touch where the snout starts. So it's going to have to kind of curve inwards like that. The back piece here is also affected, so let's just move this to the side. Did it become taller? No, it just became more like that. So that's the back piece, if you can imagine it. And one more thing that I might do is I might decide that, oh, it's kind of weirdly flat at the top of this poor dog shape, so let's make it round. And I'm going to make it round by making a dart. I know how to make darts. Do you though? Do you really? We're going to get into dart making in the next section, but I'll just very quickly draw out what it might look like. And that'll be more like that. Oh, by the way, since I've changed this side, I'm going to have to make the same kind of markers so that it fits well on this, this L piece. The back has been changed as well. So you can see how you can start from a very simple shape and just build upon that and just keep on kind of stretching it like dough and changing the pattern as you go in order to get the shape that you want. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to drink a bit of water and read this chat. Definitely going to start drafting patterns on the computer now. I don't. I don't do that. I mean, it might be helpful to you. Definitely come up with your own style. But later on, when I am going to show how I would do a pattern from scratch, I do it all on paper. Maybe it's like just, a physical thing that I enjoy. But or maybe it's because like I have enough intuition that I don't need to, keep on rotating things on the on the computer to tell what the heck I'm doing. But that's personally how I prefer to do. So you don't have to do your patterns on the computer. In fact, I would probably find it pretty annoying because then you'll have to either trace out your shapes or print out your shapes. Let's see, Wandering Boots asks, I wonder if there's any software specifically for sewing, or if most people find it easier to just use Photoshop type software. There is software for sewing. There's like this really cool software that I've never worked with. It's pretty much you 3D model a thing and it will spit out a pattern. And that seems super convenient in some ways. I've never played with it before. It's more of a fashion kind of thing. Like my education it touched upon fashion and, you know, building of clothes, but not so much in the manufacturing of clothes. Like they didn't train us to become workers in a factory or a designer that creates things for workers in a factory. So it would be interesting. But I feel like there's going to be setbacks. There's going to be things that I can't properly emulate with other methods of pattern design. Anyways, off to the next bit. Manipulating to change shape, preserving angles and increasing surface area. Okay. This is where we really get crazy, because now we're going to start really looking at things in terms of surface area instead of just the outside lines. The outside lines are just kind of a consequence of the fullness that you might want in a pattern. And while we do that, we still have to pay attention to the length of the side of a pattern. And we also have to very much pay attention to angles. So let's look at this first thing that I have here. It is a shirt pattern that I arrived at through a bodice block. So I'm just going to go back to this first image here. It might be a little bit incomprehensible what you're looking at here. Because if you're not familiar with sewing, you might be like, and I keep saying, oh, this is a shirt. And you're like, wait, this is a shirt? What? All right, so maybe it's better to look at a different pattern. Let's look at this one. Yes. Yes, this one you can more easily understand how this half of a pattern, okay, let me just outline it. This is this. All right, we got it? Okay, let's go back to where we were at before. So this is half of a front of a t-shirt. Let's say that this t-shirt fits this boy perfectly. It has his exact waist measurement. It has his exact side measurement, shoulder measurement, arms measurement. But let's say he has a twin sister and she has exactly the same measurements as him, except she's going to need a bust dart. So, how are we going to add a dart to something that doesn't already have a dart? Well, let me tell you what you can't do. You can't just go like, I'm gonna draw a bust dart, because you have just removed a ton of fabric. All of this fabric is gone. And also, the length has been greatly reduced. And this mythical lady has the exact same proportions as her brother, so she can't have a smaller waist. You can't do that. What we're going to do is we're going to add a dart here, and I'm going to show you how the heck I'm going to do it. Let's say we want the dart to be like this. What I would do is I would rotate this. And you can see how there's now space. And this space represents added fabric. Let's see, how did I do this? But I can't just have this whole dart like going straight up where it used to be, because what's the point? You've just completely recreated what you were trying to alter in the first place. You're going to want to keep the excess that you've created. So I might draw in a dart, kind of like that. I'm just going to put this here to represent a little lighter. All the extra fabric that you now have. But in changing this dart, I have now changed the angle. The angle used to be 90 degrees here. It was 90 degrees here before I added this extra line. So what am I going to do about that? I'm actually going to have to add a little bit of... I'm going to extend this out a little bit and curve it back towards the rest of the pattern. And this angle here needs to be 90 degrees. I'm going to do the same for this thing here. This will be a 90-degree angle. That's how you form a dart. And that's how you form a dart to increase surface area. I want to... Let's go back to this pattern, because you might notice on these professional patterns even, they also have a little bit of a curve where the darts are, for exactly the same reason, because they need to keep the bottom at 90 degrees. Because if they don't keep it at 90 degrees, what's going to happen is there's going to be this weird angle in your final product, and you don't want that. So I'm going to demonstrate this again on something else that needs darts, which is this part of a circle. Let's pretend that this part of a circle is... Where is it? I'm looking for one of my slides. This one. Let's pretend this circle is part of Samus's butt, and we're trying to make it fatter than it is when she has a flat butt. So what we would do is, let's make a little dart here. And just like how we altered the t-shirt, we're going to rotate most of the shape to create a dart. And then we're going to make the dart a little bit smaller, because there's no point in having this dart go all the way in, because you're just obliterating this material that you've added. So you see, this is now the added surface area. And just like before, we're going to have to extend this outwards a little bit in order to make sure the angle is 90 degrees. And this has also the added benefit of having even more surface area added. Let's do that again somewhere else. Let's make even more darts. So now you can see I've added quite a bit of surface area, and that's good, because the length of these red lines that I added are still the same length as the original side of this petal. And you might notice the other side of the petal, this side, also has the same length. Like, I've not touched that at all. I've just kind of rotated it, and I've changed its curve. It's okay to change curves. Well, it depends, but it's often okay. And that will become very interesting in this last example that I'm going to give. So, what's going on here? Let's move this up so we have a bit more space. Let's say you want to make this shape. It's basically a cylinder, and you're making it using this screen pattern piece. It's just a tube. Okay? But let's say instead of a simple cylinder, what you want to make is one in which the top is a bit larger than the bottom. So let me tell you what you don't do. You would not simply go like, okay, it's a little bit slanted, so I'm just gonna cut off the sides of this pattern. It's really hard for me to draw what this is going to look like, but I encourage you to go home, take a strip of paper, and roll it up in a tube and be like, okay, that's a cylinder. And then try to cut these triangles out of that tube, out of that square piece of paper, rectangular paper, and try to roll it up again and see what happens when these edges meet. What you actually end up with is something that's like a picture kind of shape that's kind of slanted. It's not a good look. And part of the reason that's happening is because this red line here is, oh, I shouldn't draw something, anyways, is now longer than the middle. You need to make sure all of the sides, all of this length, width, this up and down is even, because on the final shape that you want, all of these are going to be the same length, right? So how do you get to doing that? First of all, let's just obliterate these lines. So how do you change one side of a pattern piece while keeping the other ones intact? You can do it by, let's see, by using curves. So if I were to just rotate this like that, and then if I were to join these two pieces together, I have now increased the length of the top of this pattern while maintaining the length of its sides and its bottom. And if we were to do that several times, you see what I'm getting at here? You have greatly increased the length of the top while maintaining all the other angles. So what you ended up with is kind of a coffee filter shape. And that will give you the results that you want in order to make that kind of tapered cylinder shape. If you were to do this any other way, and which I have done because I sometimes don't bother to just cut things and spread them out, the thing you have to keep in mind is that these angles need to be at 90 degrees. That was another thing. Back when you had mistakenly and foolishly cut this piece of fabric over here, you have changed the angles. And that's going to result in the bottom of this very sad cup. If we were to look at it from another angle, if I can even manage to draw it, it's kind of like that. And from the bottom, it will be kind of like, that? What a sad, sad cylinder this is. Alright, I'm going to take a moment to read the chat. Alrighty. Okay, I think with this, you have a pretty good grasp of how to turn 2D shapes into, or 2D pattern pieces into 3D shapes. Like, the more you practice with it, the better you'll get. Like, everything I've taught you here, I'm able to teach you because I have made this mistake sometime in the past. And it made me kind of go back to the drawing board and go like, what the heck did I do wrong? And eventually be like, oh, that's why, and just kind of like leveled up my understanding of 3D physics and all that jazz. And you can go forth too. Go forth, my children, and make your own plushie patterns. But I'm going to give you a few more pointers, because you don't have to necessarily start at the sphere, or start at the cube, or start with someone else's pattern. I'm going to talk about a few common things that you might try to make when you're making your own plushie. Specifically, I'm going to talk about arms. I'm going to talk about snouts. So, let's look at arms. Here we have an arm. You might be familiar with a shirt pattern and a sleeve. Like, this would be a sleeve pattern right here. And an arm is it's very similar to the shape of a sleeve. You just kind of stuff a shirt sleeve and there you go, you got an arm. Now, I want to explain this shape. Why is it this weird curve? Alright, let's look at it very systematically. Let's say we got a person here. I'm going to draw a simple figure of a person. And they've got a very simple torso. Kind of like that. Now, here is his armhole. And let's say we want the arm to be a cylinder. And we've already gone over what is... Good lord, did I not... Dang it, I didn't use an extra layer. Okay, this is fine. I need a new layer for this. So a cylinder, we know by now that its shape is basically a rectangle that's coiled up into a tube. And that can be fine for your arm if you're okay with your guy T-posing all the time. However, if you want him to actually have a bit of a more natural, relax of the arm, have it slightly down from T-posing, then what you need to do is you need to take your samurai sword and cut this cylinder at an angle. So I've just got a little picture here in case I, can't draw it clearly of what that might look like. So over here that is. You see this is a piece of bamboo that's been sliced in a diagonal. So that's basically what we're doing to this cylinder. Now, what is that going to look like in a 2D pattern? What's it going to be like if you were to unravel this new shape, which I'm going to draw here? It's going to look something like that, right? I did not draw this one. It's going to be... still didn't draw it all that well. Well, what this pattern is going to look like is it's going to have this waveform. And you might be like, huh, what, how? How does that work? You could, if you were at home, I encourage you to take a piece of paper and cut out this shape and then coil it into a tube. And then you will see that it makes a diagonal circle. But since you may or may not have that, I'm going to draw it out for you. So if you can use your brain mind and imagine this shape put onto its side so that the bottom is absolutely flat. And the lowest part of this diagonal cut is facing you, and the tallest part is facing away. So you see it looks something like that. I hope that makes sense. And let's say this bottom part is the seam. And I want to note again, the seam has a right angle over here. Yes, this has a right angle up here too. Check out what happens when I spread this out. If you were to envision me taking this ninja cut cylinder, opening it at the seam, and then spreading out its pieces. Look at that! It's got a waveform pattern at the top. So that's how you would make a cylinder or an arm that's angles slightly downwards from the torso. However, word of warning, you might notice that this length is now longer than the original length of the tube. So what you need to do is you're going to need to actually make the armhole bigger. And you can only do this so far. You can't make an arm this way and have it, going right down against the person's waist. Because what's going to happen is the elbow is going to be attached to the ribs and it's not going to be able to lift its arms at all. Let's give an example here. So I'm going to draw my person again. This time we're seeing him from straight on. And we're going to look at this arm from straight on. Let's say the armhole ends here. And I'm going to draw a big red line underneath just so we can see things a little better. So at this point, he's T-posing, right? And let's say we do that ninja slice, and the arm has come down a little bit. You might note how before the blue line was touching the red line. Now the red line has gone slightly under the blue line, so that's why you need to increase your armhole. But you're not gonna want to go too far in that, because look at how ridiculous this becomes as you lower the arm more and more. So this is dumb. Let's not do that. Instead, if you want to make an arm that really hugs the side of the torso, you can't rotate from the top of the shoulder. What you need to do is you're going to need to rotate from the bottom of the armpit. Hiya! Like that. Now the arm can hang really far down. But we all see the problem here, right? You're going to need to add something. You're going to need to add his shoulder. So what that's going to end up looking like is you got the tube pattern, and then you make kind of a dome pattern. Kinda, sorta, but also not really, because this still needs to fit into a circular hole. So this is actually going to end up looking a little bit like that. It has that waveform to it, but it's split down the center. And if you're going to do something like that, you're still going to have to make sure that these are at right angles. Okay, so that is arms. Let's talk about snouts. So we're all familiar with this pattern we got here, this shape I've talked about before. And it is by kind of thinking about a snout in this shape that I arrived at this, what is this guy's name? Sylvanos plushie pattern. So, let's see here. I started off looking at the blue part, going like, okay, he's got, you know, his face here, his snout, but I wanted the snout, the front of the snout, so this red section, I wanted the side of the snout to wrap around the front of the snout. So this would be the red section, if you can imagine that. And he has embroidery that touches the seam here. So I have mentioned before that I don't like it when embroidery goes right over a seam, but in this case I'm okay with it because like his snout is so long, it's just a single little line of embroidery. If it doesn't entirely match or if it makes a little too much bulk, it's not the hugest deal. Let's see. Whoops, no, that's not right. Multiple layers. There we go. Yeah, so I'm coloring this in kind of where it would be represented on this blocky form. Let's see, what else happened? He's got his snout, so his snout also has a bit of a hole for his nose. There will be like one portion that represents the part that's yellow, and then which kind of goes over here. There's the part that's green that will go over here, and you notice I'm getting wider and wider as I go because his head is wider than his snout. And I made a big triangle here because he's got this big old leaf thing at the top. Well, let's just color that in. And because they're just one piece, I'm just going to try and blur them together. Well, it looks awful. No, it looks fine. There we go. This should be blurred together as well. And he also has a bottom piece, which we don't see on the blocky form, but that's okay. It also just kind of extends outwards because I wanted the head to be bigger than the snout. Let's make that kind of an orange. Yeah, and that is basically the Sylvanos pattern. So this is the actual pattern, as you can see here. Oh yes, I wanted to make a little note about plushies in general. So plushies, they're in a way, they're like, the outside fabric is like a balloon skin, and the stuffing is the air. And the air is always going to push against the area of least resistance and want to push against the areas that are very thin. So if you ever want to make an element that has like a very sharp angular change, like for example, where the head turns into the snout, you want to make it very angular. So you see the angle here is quite severe. And I even went and added a kind of a tuck on top of his nose over here, which would be a tuck, I guess it would be right here, huh? And that further kind of just squishes down the material that would otherwise want to bulge up from the fabric. So I do that often when doing snouts. Let's see. For Rousey, let's talk about Rousey. It's kind of the same deal, but he has a shorter snout, and this time I really did not want to interrupt the stitching of his mouth. So let's start kind of the same way. His cute little face is like this. Here's his eyes and his cheeks and his face. However, I connected both sides of his face. Smooch! So it became something like that. And the top of his nose is pretty similar to Sylvanos's. It's just like a strip or something. Very short, with this yellow area being barely anything. Ah, interesting thing is that, let me get a different color. This length needs to be the same length as over here, even though it's curved. You just have to be aware of that. What else did I do? I decided because his snout is so short, I am comfortable with kind of turning the main area of this pattern and merging it into the bottom as well. So it became something like that. So let's color this in. This is like here, this is like that. You see how it still mostly corresponds to the blocky shape. And all this underneath part has been built in to the main plushie. Ah, his nose is over here. Okay, this blur really isn't helping that much, but you get the gist. Let's see. Here is what Rousey's pattern actually looks like. The final Rousey pattern. Yeah, there we go. I think I am done the lecture part of my tutorial, of my seminar thing. So now I'm going to take a bit of a water break, get some more water, and I'm going to encourage you guys to start posting your plushie designs on the chat. Blah blah blah, no particular criteria, just needs to be a character you think will make a cool plushie. Might help your chances if you choose something I like, blah 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 blah. I'm taking a break. See you in a little bit, and start suggesting your characters. Alrighty, I think this is a good selection. So let's start to narrow it down a little bit. Alright. So, I guess this is just dealer's choice. Well, personally, I don't really want to do anything too simple. So, sorry, Baba. Let's see. Kind of not sure about this mascot character because I generally don't want to make things that already have a plushie of them. Let's see, which one is that? Where is it? Okay, heck, I didn't name these layers, so I don't even know where this is anymore. Ah, this one, okay. So probably not this guy. I kind of wanted to do something with a little bit of embroidery. So I'm really strongly thinking of Marina Lightyear. She looks like a good candidate. I can't find where her picture is. There it is. Let's see, what other requests? Oh, music stopped again. Haha, caught it this time. Let's see, little moss dude. That's actually not... That could be interesting. Lots of fuzz to work with. So I remember these ladies from Mario RPG. Or not Mario RPG, Mario and Luigi. Alright, let's keep whittling this down a little bit. I think I'm gonna pass on Moss Friend here. Where is he? Ah, jeez. Don't know where he is anymore. There are too many layers. See, I'm gonna pass on Mender Bug, and also probably Moss Friend, because I've done a lot of Hollow Knight stuff already. Okay, here's Moss Friend. Goodbye, Moss Friend. Cute little UFO. How much time do I have? I have 1 hour. I want to do something with a bit more complexity. Oh, Marina. Now I'm looking at Marina going like, maybe that's too much complexity. What do you guys think? Should I do something complicated or should I do something very straightforward? I can probably actually freaking whip out now in an hour. Okay, we got some complicated. Maybe I should do Majora's Mask. That will take me probably way too long. Raphael is cute, but it's also kind of simple. Yeah, I especially want to do some embroidery because next stream I would definitely want to have it be partially like an embroidery tutorial. A poll? What do we have here? Should I vote on it? Oh, simple versus complicated. Okay, alright, okay. Let the viewer decide. okay, how about this? If I end up doing a simple one, then I can try to like just pump it out before 4 o'clock. And next time for the embroidery tutorial, I can do a patch of something. A patch of one of these characters, maybe. Oh no, if I were to do a complicated design, which is I could do, it's not going to be a finished thing. I mean, the patterns usually take me like a week to really figure out to make it good, because it just takes so much like mental gymnastics for me to figure out a pattern. There's some people who can do it really fast, like you know when a new Pokemon gets released and pretty much like 2 hours later there's a plushie of it out? I'm like, wow, I can't do that. That's too crazy. Okay, simple is winning by landslide. Okay, so I shall do a simple. Simple. Okay, I am eyeing the cute little UFO and Raphael the Raven. Is this the correct one? Yes. Where's Raphael? There he is. Now the question is, I said I would do one as a patch or I'll do a patch and I'll do a simple plushie. Which one should be the patch? Which one should be the plushie? Can we do another poll? I guess let's just focus on Raphael. Should Raphael be a plush or a patch? And then cute little UFO will just be the opposite. Goodbye, everybody else. Are we able to do another poll? Ooh, the poll is pretty tight. Okay, I'm gonna start just rustling through my fabric stash to find fabric for both these guys. So I'll be back in a few seconds. Alright, we have a winner! Raphael the Raven! Let's see, okay, I'm gonna read the chat a little bit. Oh yeah, those feet. Yep, Raphael the Raven is from Yoshi's Island. He fights you, he takes you to the moon and starts stomping on it to release lasers, and you have to shove like these poles up his bum. Yeah, video games. Okay, I'm just gonna change the angle of what we're looking at here. Actually, no, maybe I'll stick with this for now. Okay, thank you, UFO. I will see you next time. Okay, so when I am designing a plushie, I usually start with a few sketches, just to, you know, get my head around what this character is going to look like. Let's give him a size. Or maybe not. You know what? I'm just going to wing it. I'm not going to worry about that. Yeah, so drawing it out really helps me figure out like the nuances of it. Maybe it's just like you know, the thing I have to do as an artist. So clearly he has a ball shape, so I'm gonna start with possibly like a petaled shape. Should I do 4 or should I do 6 petaled? I'm thinking 4 petals with darts at the bottom. Should I have this? So right now I'm thinking, okay, if I'm gonna have should I have the eyes here, or should I have the eyes like here? Basically, should the seam go through the center of the face? I think I actually will do that. It's not a huge disturbance to his full figure for me to do that. I have to think, am I okay with the top being like this, having only four pieces of fabric on the top? Because that's going to make it look a little bit squarish. I think I'm going to be okay. Because he's also very squat. I don't know. I mean, oftentimes I can have as much experience as possible, and then I actually go to make a thing and go like, oh, this was not quite what I envisioned. But anyways, I think I'm going to want to have more darts at the bottom to help control his shape. The seam at... let's move this down a bit more. The seam at the top is handy because I can insert feathers out of it. Now I'm thinking, what should these feathers be? I'm like, oh, do I have like actual black feathers in my stash? I don't think I do, because if I did, I would totally just insert actual feathers in. That, I think, would be very charming for this plushie. So I'm thinking about the shape of these little feathers. Okay, I am going to actually have in my hand a piece of fleece, because I've decided I'm going to use fleece, and just play around with it. You know what? Let me change my angle so you can kind of... Yes. So you can see what my hands are doing. Yes. So I'm playing now with this piece of fabric, going like, okay, if I fold it like this, how thick is it going to be? Is that going to be okay for the little tufts of fur, tufts of hair? Would I even leave it as a single, like, not as a sewn piece, but as a cut piece? Which, by the way, I actually never would do that, because I hate raw edges. If he is big enough, depending on his size, it might be okay, even though I feel like the fabric's a little bit thick. So maybe he'll be... Yeah, I'm okay with it being sewn pieces together. So each of these little furs, I keep calling it fur. Should I, it's gonna be something like this. Now the question is, should I make it like all as a single piece? Or should I make them like 3 separate pieces? that I later stick together. There's advantages and disadvantages to both of them. If I do it like this, in this way, I have to make a seam allowance around them, right? And then just by virtue of like there needing to be space in between every feather in order for me to sew it together, the feathers are going to end up being a little bit conjoined, and that might not be a good look. The problem with having them all be separate pieces is that then there is not a lot of consistency to putting them together. Like when I sew it together, like it could end up being any combination of things, which might be okay. It's a little chaotic back there. But also that's a lot of material that I have to sew through. Because when you imagine you sew two pieces of fabric together and turn them inside out, at the seams there is 4 pieces of fabric. So imagine that. 4 and 4 and 4. So there's a total of like, how many is that? 12. 12 layers of fabric. Oh heck, and that's just the feathers. Let's not forget the body. That's going to be an extra 4. So that's 16 layers of fabric sewn together. That's starting to sound a little difficult. So yeah, that might be a consideration. I feel like leaving that for now. Let's see. Oh, I'm reading this and ooh, yeah. People are asking, should I make the moon? The moon would be fun. I don't know if I have time for that. I don't know if I even have time to make this. Hey Fangamer, how long can this stream go for? I know I'm supposed to end at 4, but Let's see. Someone asks, does the edge of the fleece fray much? It doesn't really. So some people will leave edges, like raw edges of fleece. Personally, I don't like it. I think it's bad mojo. If you need a little extra time, that's okay. Okay, let's not go too crazy about this. I wonder if I can do a combination of, for the hair, what if I made his hair kind of like this, kind of drawing all over the place, that's fine. And then have a third piece that goes on top, like that. Then I kind of have best of both worlds. Let's see if that works. Okay, whatever. Moving on. The beak is going to be interesting. Okay, I'm going to do something quite interesting with this beak. How should I go about it? So this would be the hole where the beak would be inserted. It will need a seam allowance. I'm just thinking, is this going to be okay? It will probably be okay. The thing is, I don't want to just make a simple slit and then insert a flat piece of beak. That's not the way I roll. Because then the beak will kind of flop up and down, if you can imagine, on some simpler plushies where they just have like arms or legs just simply inserted into the body. They flop up and down, they don't have much dimension. I want this guy to have dimension. But the problem with, like, you know, building, like for example the Mr. Saturn nose, if I were to build something like that, I would have to tackle with that, like remember I was talking about when I was explaining the snouts, how if you're going to have one element very sharply going to another one, you're going to be working against the fabric. It's going to want to push out. So I don't want his beak to be like, I'm worried about the beak going like, ugh. Just, heck, I'm not even drawing it properly. But it's going to want to stretch out as much as possible. I think my solution to that is going to be actually to have the beak be like an encased element. So I will have a small bit of fabric on the inside which will keep the stuffing of the beak separate from the stuffing of the body. pattern-wise, I think this probably works out. And the beak pattern will probably just be like this. Okay, let's reimagine this. We're looking at it from the top. Let's make it a little bit like that. And I'm going to want to make it a little bit round where it attaches to the face, because the plushie in the end is going to end up being round. So if you can imagine, this is a plushie from the top. We've got the hairs, we've got the eyes. Yes, I am satisfied with this pattern. Now for the feet. Okay, I'm going to read the chat a little bit. Will it be hand sewn or machine? The beak, I mean. I rarely resort to hand sewing. If this is going to be mass manufactured, like, they don't like hand sewing. It's inconsistent and they have to do it really fast. It is slow. And in fact, if you look at any mass manufactured plushie and you find the hole where they turn the plushie inside out and then hand sew it, it always looks a little bit rough. So I generally try to stay away from that as much as possible. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but if I can do it with machine, then I will do it with machine. Ooh, that makes me think. I'm going to have a problem here, because there is no seam for me to... If I'm going to insert his beak in, if you can imagine the beak from the side, the seam of the beak is going to be like that. That's a problem, because there's a seam on his body going up and down here. The seam on his beak goes side to side. So, what am I going to do? I've explained before how, you know, let me find that old picture. Not this one. This one. In order to insert something small into something else, I need a seam. But this, of course, this only works if those seams are matching. If I were to insert a tube, here, and the seam for this tube starts like up here, like I can't insert that. I can't because it doesn't open up in the same way as this hole in the body opens up. So okay, I have an issue with the beak now. How will I solve it? I am thinking the bottom half of the beak I might do the thing where I add a dart. So the bottom half of the beak might end up looking like... Okay, let's start with the regular beak pattern. And then we split it. Let's see, I'm not actually aiming to add material, so... However, even if I don't want to add material, it's still going to make a bit of a hump at its apex. So do I want him to have a bit of a hump at the bottom of his beak? I don't know if that's a good look. What should I do? First of all, I'm going to switch my view back to this. I don't need to see my hands drawing all the time. So even a simple plushie like this goes through some thought. I could alternatively make a seam here. Oh, I don't like that at all. That kind of disrupts the flow of the plushie. Alternatively, I could make the bottom of the beak just 2 whole new pieces. Then I don't have to worry about that at all. I think... I wonder if this is going to look okay. If I curved it at the tips, and then of course I have to adjust the angle a little bit, but that's okay. Then he's gonna... If I were to draw the beak His top of the beak is going to look normal. His bottom's going to have, well, it's actually, when it's stuffed, it's going to have a little bit of a pooch. And but the bottom is going to have even more of a pooch. And I'm wondering if that's going to look okay. Should I give the top a pooch as well? Like a deliberate pooch? Is pooch a word? Hard to say what's the right call here. Oh. If I make him big enough, I actually don't need to worry about this at all, about inserting the beak. Because if it's big enough, then, like, so long as the machine can get into the inside of the beak and into the inside of the mouth, I don't really have to worry about it. So maybe that will be my solution. Just make him friggin' bigger. But then if I start making him too big, then I'm going to run into an issue in which, I don't know if any of you were here for last time I ran the seminar. Where's the picture? This picture. Wait, yeah. His beak, if I'm going to leave it as simply as two pieces of fabric that's round, it's going to end up, circle this, a bright color. It's going to end up really wrinkled along the seams if it's too big because of this effect. Oh my goodness, this is more complicated than I thought. And that actually often happens in my plushie making. Like someone will give me what looks like a very simple pattern, and I'm like, oh, I can whip that out, no problem. And then, no, it's not simple at all. Okay, considering about the wrinkles that the side of the pattern, the beak might make, I think I actually will go, I'm not comfortable with this, man. No, okay, let's not delete that totally. Let's take a closer look at if I were to make a dart in the middle. What that will do. I think I might stick with that. And what I will actually do is I will make his face a little bit, the opening of his mouth a little bit wider along the bottom. So that way, the little bit of a hump that's going to happen at the apex of this dart, if you can imagine his beak kind of going like that. Okay. Wait, his beak, therefore, wouldn't be like this, you know, with this little apex hump here. It will instead be like that, which is a lot less noticeable and a lot more natural. The hump is still here, but because everything else kind of angles downwards, then it's better. It makes a more natural shape. So if I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to increase the size of this and possibly change the angle of the top here. That's what's going to end up looking like, a little bit like that. Okay, one moment, going to read the chat. Doop, doop, doop. Space Coyote says, I apologize for all my past plushie designs. Yep, Space Coyote is like one of the designers at Fangamer, and sometimes she gives me plushie designs to work with. And then I'd have to look at her designs and just kind of I would just look at them in despair, and then I will try to tackle them. Okay, I think that's a better beak. So now the opening is a little bit wider. Okay, alright, now let's look at the feet. I'm kind of excited about the feet. I'm excited about the toes, because what I want to do is I want to make like a big old pillow shape. Okay, I'm going to Give myself some room and delete all these. I didn't end up deleting them. What the heck? Here we go. I want to make like a big old pillow shape. And then use needle sculpting to sew these in and make big old toes. That's going to be really exciting. So, what is going to be a pillow shape that's big enough? And I'm also thinking about how is it going to connect to the rest of the body. Let's look at the pillow shape first. Because I don't want to make it like just two pieces of fabric put together. I think I'm going to need to go for a bit more oomph than that. I find myself resorting to a cube, actually. Thinking about things in kind of a cube shape. But I don't want all the seams of the cube, obviously. So I'll round out the corners. Am I able to do this? So I guess this turned into a bit of a cylinder. However, I'm not happy with that because I don't want his foot to have a freaking seam going right up top like that. Well, let's... How do I handle this? Ah. Okay, got it. This is a piece of fabric that is going to be like a bit of a dome, I think. And then the bottom will be like a flat piece. That might work. Well, at this point, I think it's worth it to try. Okay, I'm gonna try and get a better idea of how this foot is gonna fit into the body. So I'm just gonna draw out the body here. This time he's facing forward. So I don't want the feet to be like right under. That's not what it seems to be. I want it like this if possible. Not sure how to negotiate like this little area. I guess what I can do... I can make it bulge out from his front. Ooh, that'd be really handy with this seam right here. Ooh, what if I cheat? Maybe I should cheat. What if I make it so his feet are going upwards like this? How cute is that? Oh my gosh, that's super cute! You know what? I'm gonna do that because I don't have a designer breathing down my neck telling me what to do. I can do whatever the heck I want. So, yeah. I'll make a pillow like this. Yes. And what that pattern will likely look like... let me think. Okay. Here's how it's kind of gonna go. We're talking about this part. Let's start with a circle. And let's... no, let's not even taper it in yet. Let's do the thing where we give it a bit of a cone shape. So you see, if I make my pattern like this, it's going to turn into a cone. But I don't have to worry about it like becoming a cone because I'm just going to destroy this area here. And that's going to be where it connects to the body. And I'm going to do the thing where I manipulate darts in order to make it a dome shape. So probably one in the center. You know what? Not even one in the center. Ideally, I have these darts happening where his toes are, but I don't know if I can manage that. Okay, where should the darts be? Okay, we already have one in the back. Well, that's not really a dart, that's just a seam. We have the circle for the opening. I don't think I can manage to just have the seams only be here, because I don't want just these areas to be cushy. I'm gonna have to have extra seams like over here as well, I think. But at least for the ones in the front, I think I can manage it. And because I know what the heck I'm doing, I'm just gonna draw these instead of doing the whole rigmarole for like rotating and you know, properly figuring out darts. And because also at this time I don't have a set shape that I'm necessarily aiming towards. I don't have a set surface area. So I am okay with just doing whatever. So you notice I'm being kind of careful about keeping 90-degree angles at the end of my darts. Even though it's a little counterintuitive when you're drawing out the pattern. Going like, oh, why does this curve inward? Shouldn't it curve outward? Ooh, this has a funny kind of waveform to it. Okay. I'm gonna freaking start making room for things. Actually, no, I don't wanna. Shoot, how am I gonna do this? Let's just shrink everything. Because I want space to draw more. Okay, one moment, I'm just gonna read the chat. Space Coyote says, I hand over the designs and go figure it out. Yeah, pretty much. that's my deal. That's part of my job. And it's neat because even though I might initially look at a design that a designer gives me and go like, oh, what the heck are they thinking? I have to eventually figure it out. And that's usually when I come up with new ways of doing things. So it's pretty nice. And there's rarely been a time in which I've just been like, I can't do this. Like, I always come up with a way of doing it. Sit and Ralph. Okay, the feet be firmly planted to the ground. No! I refuse. I quit. No, I'm kidding. The plush needs to be reversible and turned to Yoshi. Do you guys know? I don't suppose you guys know about when we tried to make the Madeline and Madeline plushies reversible. I wonder if I have her here actually. Give me a moment. Let me just try and fish her out. Check this out. Oh man, exposures. Oh, that's better. This is the first prototype of Madeline from Celeste. And they actually wanted me to make her be able to turn inside out and the inside being turned into Madeline. I thought it was a cool idea. I haven't made a plushie. Okay, you know what? I just realized my mic was down the whole time, so I don't know if you all heard that. Yeah, okay. Alright, well now it's down, so let me just start again. Where was I? Okay, so this is the first prototype of a Madeline plushie from Celeste, and they wanted Madeline to turn into her alter ego, Madeline. And they wanted to do it by means of this zipper in her, which is part of her design. And at first I'm like, oh man, that's super cool. I am gonna try this challenge. Like, but it ended up being probably not realistically feasible. Because the thing is, if one plushie is inside the other, the plushie needs to be stuffed with the other one, if you understand. So the stuffing that usually goes into a plushie... What do I have? I should have a plushie around here. Anyways, the stuffing that usually goes into a plush is very carefully stuffed in, and it goes into all its crevices. But if it's stuffed with another plushie, with fabric, it's heavy, it's dense, and it doesn't fluff out like stuffing. I try to mitigate that a bit by going like, okay, let's make the hands and the legs individual elements, so you see how they're individually stuffed. However, now the Madeline that's inside this Madeline will also need to have that amount of stuffing. So, okay, you need to make the body big enough for all of that to fit in. It couldn't fit into just the torso section of the body. It also had to fit into the head. Like, there just wasn't enough room in this body to fit a whole nother plushie. And so therefore the head is unstuffed. It's very not pleasant to look at, right? Another issue we came up with is this zipper. This zipper is a reversible zipper. If I were to turn it inside out, the zipper pull can be turned on the inside, so that was pretty cool. However, it became very difficult to pull it up and down and to sew it in. It needs quite a lot of room to work with. So even though the zipper, like, it looks like the zipper goes from like here to here, it actually, the only open space is from like here to here. So there's very little opening inside. And that opening you will need to be able to stuff all of Madeline into. So if you've ever turned a plushie inside out, when it's not even stuffed... Actually, I have an example here. Hey! Oh, this is good. Well, I'll show you in a second. If you want to bag out, because plushies are basically bags, the actual term is called bagging out. If you want to bag out a plushie, you need to have a hole big enough for that plushie to go through. And usually that's not a big deal, because the only thing you're pulling through is fabric. However, Madeline is going to have stuffed elements, so you're going to need to pull arms and legs and fabric through this little hole. Now this prototype doesn't even have Madeline in it. It just has the beginnings of a Madeline jacket. Because I just couldn't. Also, isn't this kind of horrifying if they were like conjoined twins at the belly? Because that's how it would have been like if I had completed this. And I said to the people that, well, this is how it's going to look. If you still want this effect, to make it practical, it needs to be bigger. But it's still going to have not that good a look. And then that's when they're like, okay, let's make 2 plushies instead. Get out of here. Let me read the chat a little bit. Give that bird some beans. He'll happily sit. Oh yeah, this guy's gonna have some beans. We have a bean bag inside of both somehow. Is there another plush inside the prototype? Okay, I answered that question. Okay, hey, let's have a little bagging out party. I have made here, I just happen to have a Katamari plushie that I've been working on. Sometimes I run my own streams, and I can't make, you know, official plushies when I'm streaming. I have to make ones that are from my own designs. And he has, he's a monster. He has so many little parts to him. I won't go into that. If you want to learn more about it, you'll have to watch my own stream at like what, twitch.com/eyes5. I think the VODs are still up there. You can see how he was made. But right now, his belly is pre-stuffed, so he has a pre-stuffed element to it. And the bottom of his tail is the opening. It's a very small opening for quite a lot of stuff, but I have confidence that I know what the heck I'm doing. So let's disrupt everything by turning this guy inside out. It's easiest probably to go for the furthest element first, so I'm going to pinch his snout and pull out his body from his snout. Oh, this is horrific. I'm going to go for the tail. I'm going to push in each of the legs just to get it through before I go for the big stuffed element of his belly. And now very carefully, time to work the stuffing in. Now this fabric that I made Ridley out of is actually quite delicate, and what I have done, I don't know if you can see it, is I made a stitch. You can't see it at all. Maybe a little bit from the underside. It's I made a stitch along the tail because this is the part that will be stretched the most when I'm bagging out, and that stitch just keeps the fabric from just like ripping. Anyway, so now all his little arms are in here, and I will have to slowly... Where's my hemostat? My other hemostat. Here we go. This, I think, is the most... one of the funnest parts of a plushie is to turn it inside out. Because before it was like this fabric barf, and now it finally becomes a fabric skin. I can't pull out the little claws. I'll have to go inside and push them out very carefully. Come on. Come on, we're on camera. Don't embarrass me like this. It's a very painstaking process to bag out little parts like this. And it's even worse when you're trying to stuff them, because you have to go very slowly. But it's okay. It's a labor of love. Oh, look at that. Look at this little hand. Alright, Crocomire, he has 6 arms. Each arm has 3 fingers. Each claw finger has 2 pieces that needs to be sewn 1, 2, 3 times. And I'm making I made 2 Crocomires at the same time. So that is a total of 72 pieces of fabric. Tiny, tiny little cloth pieces of fabric. Enough about him. Let's go back to what the heck I was talking about before. Yay, Raphael. See, there's a question, will you sell a Crocomire in my Etsy shop? Yes, when these suckers are done, they will be up for sale in my Etsy shop. Let's see. Needs a 3D printed skeleton inside. Yes, people have told me that. I need to make a skeleton for the inside. But no. What is that tool? This tool is those scissory tools I was using. Let me just go back to my camera. These are hemostats. Yes, they're originally surgeon tools, but they are one of my favorite tools to use when making plushies. This one's an alligator hemostat, in which only the tip goes in and out. Very handy for long bits. Very good for bagging out plushies. Very good for stuffing them. But you definitely do not need them if you're going to make plushies. You can just live by just like a stuffing chopstick or pencil or something. That's what I did for a very long time. So it's no big deal. Let's see, questions. No, they don't have rubber caps. They're not sharp. To grab tiny stuff. Yeah, like for example, the claws on the end of the crocomire. I would pinch a tiny bit of stuffing at the end of my alligator hemostat, and and just kind of thread that through the tube of his arms and the tubes of his fingers all the way down to the tip of his claws. Okay, now what the heck was I talking about? Oh yeah, patterns, yay! So we have what is potentially a feet pattern. Just put that there. The bottom of the foot, what should I do about the bottom? Should I keep it flat? Let's keep it flat. So the bottom will just be a flat piece. Something I'll have to pay attention to is where is it the center top and the center bottom. So when I make my pattern, I will add in seam allowance, and I will make a little tab to indicate where the center is. Because I don't want to accidentally make my foot pattern like oblong in the wrong way, like just weirdly mutated. And let's see, I will therefore, when I finally make this pattern and add the seam allowance to it, I will need to also add a center top tab to match it to this side. I don't have to really worry about the back because the back already has a seam, and that will be my absolute back. I will have to take care to make sure that the summation of all of these sides is going to be the length of this foot. What else? Yep, that's probably what I will start working with. Like, okay, it's already past 4, so I mean, I'm probably not going to make this, but let's just get some pattern shapes down. Okay, so the body, let's see, we thought the top should be a 4-piece petal, so the top would have a 45-degree angle. No, 90-degree angle. Before it curves down. And let's, for now, just give it another 45-degree angle before I go like, okay, I'm gonna split it. Wait, why am I splitting it? Yeah, okay, I'm splitting it, that's right. What? Heck. Should I rotate from here? Yeah, I'll rotate from here. And at this point, I don't have to worry too much about what's happening out here because it's going to be matching to itself. So whatever I do out here is going to match with an identical piece. Let's see, I don't like this dart to be so straight, so I'm just going to give it a bit of a taper. So now it more resembles an 8-piece petal pattern that has been put together. So these should be 45-degree angles now. I'll just write that. There's going to be a hole in front of two of the pieces. So let's call this the front piece. It's gonna have a hole here. Now this is interesting, okay. I can't just make a circle. I have to, let's see, let's make a perfect circle. Back. Let's fill it with something. I can't just say, okay, this is going to be where the hole is, so I'm just going to make a dart here. Whoops. Just going to make a dart here like that. And that. That's not going to work. Because then that would be less than a circle, right? You've taken a chunk out of it. So what you actually need to do is split it apart a little bit. I didn't do this very well, right? Well, I really didn't do this well. So, there we go. So even though this is going to be basically like a void, I still have to pay attention to what kind of shape I'm creating. So that just kind of represents what is going to go in here. I hope that made sense. What next? Oh yes, the rest of the body. His eyes. I think I'm actually going to give him button eyes. So I just like would mark a spot, be like, okay, put the eye here. For his beak, we've decided already that it's going to be like this. And then once I add seam allowance, it's going to be like that, etc. Let's see. Where do I want the hair to come out of? I want it to come out of his like slightly off center, slightly below center. So therefore on his back, now his back is not entirely symmetrical. I'm going to just, oops, when I draw in the seam allowance for the back, I'll just be like, okay, I want the hair to maybe start and end right here. So then I would make little tabs on the seam allowance so I know exactly where to put my hair. And we decided before the hair is gonna, let's see, I will do the front and back hair as one piece. That way they can have like a good distance away from each other so that they can both have seam allowance. See, like that. This would be the seam allowance. And then he will have a big central hair. also has seam allowance. Whew. Okay, so that would be my pattern. And I think next time we will make this sucker. Before I sign off, let me just read the chat. Okay, nothing happened. Alright. Yeah, next time I will come back and I will have a completed pattern that I have done a little bit of experimentation with, so that we can get right to sewing and finishing off this Raphael the Raven. I will also have a picture of a tiny UFO so that we can make a patch out of it and see how an embroidery machine works, and how I might digitize an embroidery file, because it's quite a bit more complicated than you think. I'm always running into people who just kind of tell me things that I should do in embroidery, and I'm just like, this is a lot more complicated than you think. You really don't understand the process that goes through it. But you're not going to be one of those people, because you're going to understand everything about embroidery by the time I'm done with you. So, yeah, let's do the giveaway. Giveaway, giveaway. Atticus, Atticus. Congratulations, Neptar27! You have won a talking grub plush. Be sure to feed it 3 times a day, but do not expose it to water and do not feed it after midnight. Or else its father will come and eat him. Okay, I hope y'all had a good time. Go forth and sow your armies of plushies. Yep, be sure to join us next week for Laura Verdon. Alright, bye everyone.